Hello and welcome to Safety Tavern's video on noise injury prevention. This is going to be a relatively short video, so let's get right into it. 1926-52 Alpha, protection against the effects of noise exposure shall be provided when the sound levels exceed those shown in Table D2 of this section when measured on the A scale of a standard sound level meter at slow response. And here is OSHA's Table D2, permissible noise exposure. Over here, you're going to see the duration per day, hours. And over here, you'll see the decibels. So at 8 hours, you can have 90 decibels. At 2 hours, 100 decibels. At a quarter of an hour, which is 15 minutes, is 115 decibels. So the idea is pretty simple. You measure the sound that's coming out of the piece of equipment or in the environment that you're in, and if it is X high, you have to limit how long your ears are exposed to it. This is how we prevent injury. This is how we prevent hearing loss. This chart is not picture perfect for each specific tool that you're using, but it's a good rough idea of the sound levels that we're talking about. Normal speaking voice is 60 to 70 decibels. Up here you got an 86 decibel is a grinder. A 95 decibel is a masonry saw. A 97 decibel is chipping concrete. Up here you have an impact wrench at 106 decibels. This is just a rough idea. These aren't picture perfect. Again, you'll have to either measure the sound or check the user manufacturer manual, and they may be able to give you the actual decibel. One of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about decibels and sound is the environment. You see, I could take a cordless drill, and if I'm in a house with carpet, the decibels are going to be different than if I'm in a concrete building. You take that exact same drill, right, just a normal drill, and you go outside, and the decibels are going to be completely different because we're not going to have all of that smooth surface to ricochet and to bounce around in. Now, you take that same drill and you put a bunch of metal piping, and you put a bunch of metal duct around you, and you can easily get that drill, which would normally be something around 70 or 80 decibels. You can easily get that drill up into the neighborhood of 100, maybe even 110. Be careful about the tool that you're using and the environment in which you're using it. I've seen jackhammers that when they're used outside, it's pretty decent, but when we bring them into the concrete building, you can't hear anything other than that jackhammer. So be very, 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 very aware of where you're operating that tool at. Just because you didn't have to have as much PPE on the day before does not mean that tomorrow's situations, whatever it may be, you may actually have to put on additional PPE because of where you're operating that tool or because of the natural sound hazards that are in the area. So always be aware of where you're at, where you're operating that tool, and the bounce factor. Here's another chart. You've got the, again, 70 decibel speaking voice. You've got a chainsaw at 100 decibels, jackhammer 130 decibels, a jet engine at takeoff 140 decibels. Again, these are rough ideas. This is not an exact measurement. Let's do a little experiment. This is Bob, and we need Bob to run a jackhammer for us. And we estimate the amount of time that we need him to do it is about 4 hours worth of work to get the work done. So we have a problem. And that's that jackhammer, by estimation, not even by measurement, by estimation, it's roughly 130 decibels. We haven't even measured it yet. To do it right, we would need to get a sound meter, which looks like this. And no, this is not space age technology. These things have been around for a very, very, very long time. It's one of the ways that we tune in musical equipment. It's also one of the ways that we measure sound that our employees are exposed to. It is not space age equipment. Take a look here. This is a generic search engine's results, and I've got a $100 sound meter. Now, if we look at that 130 decibels, so according to OSHA, he can't even operate it for 15 minutes. If we follow the scale down, the way that it's scaling, you're looking at something around 8, maybe 10 minutes, something like that. There's no way that we can do this work with this employee in any kind of a real amount of time. So, according to OSHA, if it was at 115 decibels, then we can only operate that jackhammer per employee for 15 minutes in an 8-hour shift. You got me? That means when he's done jackhammering, he can jackhammer for 15 minutes and then he has to set it down and wait 8 hours. That doesn't mean, well, we're just going to have him jackhammer for 15 minutes at the end of the shift and then the next shift starts 20 minutes after he started jackhammering. No, that's not how that works, and that's not at all going to work with OSHA. 8 hours. You need to have an 8 hour, like there needs to be a 7 hour and 45-minute break in between this jackhammering by this one employee. 1926-52 Bravo, when employees are subject to sound levels exceeding those listed in Table D2 of this section, feasible administrative or engineering controls shall be utilized. If such controls fail to reduce sound levels within the levels of the table, personal protective equipment as required in subpart E shall be provided and used to reduce sound levels within the levels of the table. Now here is OSHA's hierarchy of controls. First, can we eliminate the noise? Next, can we buy quieter equipment or tools? Next, can we control the noise hazard? Next, can we reduce the exposure time limit for the employee? And finally is personal protective equipment. So, to use the hierarchy of controls to deal with the problem, right, we have a 130 decibel jackhammer. To use the hierarchy of controls pyramid that OSHA is telling us to, let's ask some questions based off of our actual hazard and our situation. 1. Do we have to do this with this tool? Is there another tool that we can use? Something else that can do the exact same work but doesn't have this hazard? 2. Is there a quieter version of this tool available? 3. Can we click something onto the tool that will make it quieter? 4. Can we limit time Bob is exposed to this hazard? 5. Can we put on hearing protection to reduce the decibels? So when we talk about limiting the exposure time, one of the things that I've seen people do to get around this is, let's say 130 decibels. They come out, they check the sound level that's being the decibels that our employees exposed to. We pull the operating of that tool in that exact area at 130 decibels. And what they'll do is say, okay, I need 5 guys. And 5 guys step up and they will literally say, okay, you operate for 10 minutes, you operate for 10 minutes, you operate for 10 minutes, you operate for 10 minutes. Y'all can't be anywhere near this tool while it's operating other than during your 10-minute section. And I've seen them do that to get 50 minutes worth of jackhammering done without having to expose themselves. And that's limiting the employee's exposure. OSHA says 115 decibels at 8 hours max. And that's where, we only expose the employee to it for 10 minutes. And that's where make sure you're coming under the OSHA requirements. Again, OSHA is a low bar. We're not going to aim for OSHA. We're going to aim better than OSHA, because that way if we make a mistake or whatever, we're still going to be in that good zone. So that is what that limiting the exposure looks like. That sounds crazy if you have a small company with 3 people on that, or a small crew with 3 people on that job. But if you have 200 people, you can do some very feasible things, limiting noise exposure like that, if everybody's trained and if it's proper supervision and all that kind of stuff. This is usually kind of a weird way to address this issue, but it is in the hierarchy of controls. Now we have this 130 decibel situation, and let's say we're not going to go with the crazy everybody jackhammers for 10 minutes idea. Let's say we're going to put on personal protective equipment. So I grab these earmuffs, right? Well, but how much are they going to protect me? Is it going to get me into that safe zone? And these are very cheap, $31. Again, just a generic search engine. I mean, this is Granger at $31, so I guarantee you can get them cheaper. But if you look right here, it's going to reduce 25 decibels of noise. Read the manual that comes with these things. If it is to be qualified as hearing protection, as personal protective equipment, hearing protection, there has to be a noise decibel rating for it. And these are only going to reduce 25 decibels. Let's do some math real quick. 130 decibels minus 25 decibels for the earmuffs, and you're still at 105 decibels worth of a hazard. And again, if we look at that chart, now Bob can operate for 1 hour. And so if we're going to have just Bob operating this jackhammer, that means he comes in at the beginning of the day, he operates, and he has to have 7 hours of not operating before we can let him operate again. But that's only for 1 hour, right? So theoretically, if it's a normal 8-hour shift, that means you're going to have Bob operating the jackhammer for 1 hour for 4 days in a row in order to get that 4 hours done. But most projects, man, we need it done now. And if that's the case, let's look at what else we can do. These are earplugs. Let's try some earplugs. These earplugs are rated at 32 decibels worth of reduction. So again, let's go back to our math. 130 minus 25, or at 105, minus 32 is 73 decibels. This is wearing earplugs and earmuffs. And if we take that and we look right here, oh, we are perfect. Look at this, 90 and is off the scale, which means we are able to let Bob operate this for 8 hours straight. That is how you run it. Now, whether you're going to take just an average guesstimation and hope you're right, you're going to pull off one of these charts that doesn't know your exact tool and doesn't have the reading in your exact area, that's your call. I don't think that's a good idea unless you're playing it super safe and you're always going to add like an extra 10 to 20 decibels on top of everything the chart says. Maybe that'd be okay, but again, the chart in no way does it account for the environment that you're working in. All the concrete around there, it's all going to bounce noise back at you. So be careful. I strongly recommend, at least per project, get yourself a noise meter. Rate these tools, rate their common uses. Get some quick cheat sheets for our employees. That way they know, hey, when we're operating the 55327 jackhammer in concrete area, okay, the decibels are going to be up around here. Train your employees to, when they hear that something that's a little too loud, okay, we need to start looking at hearing protection. That's how we're going to get through this with minimal injuries to hearing, or with minimal injuries and a whole bunch of employees that don't have hearing loss whenever they're 50 years old. We have countless old men who have been in construction for 30 years, and you go up and you talk to them, they're like, what? I don't hear so good. Why do you think they don't hear so good anymore? I mean, this isn't rocket science. This isn't space age technology. Why are their ears gone? It's pretty simple. Is that who you want to be? You want to be 80 years old, constantly saying, being left out of conversations because your family would rather not talk to you or tell you about it because they don't want to have to deal with having to tell you over and over and over again? Is that the end goal? Is that why you worked your butt off? Is so that way you can get to the end of your life and you can't hear anything. You can't hardly hear the television. You can't hear the grandkids playing. You can't hear the beautiful music coming out of the church piano. You can't hear anything because you sacrificed your safety. Don't end up on that road. And if you think I'm being like overly harsh, well, we never use those tools. Okay, let's look at some user manuals. Here we have a DeWalt hammer drill. Always wear proper personal hearing protection that conforms to ANSI S12.6 during use. Under some conditions and duration of use, noise in this product may contribute to hearing loss. So this is literally DeWalt saying, hey man, we're telling you wear proper hearing protection. If you look in this manual, you'll find another place where it says wear ear protectors when impact drilling. Period. So just to give you a little snapshot of how this can go. And this is a rare occurrence that these kind of things happen, but it is possible. Is OSHA walks on site and they've got an axe to grind with you. They've got beef with you, and they're looking for those infractions. And they walk up, they see an employee operating a hammer drill, and they say, "Have you read the user manual on this tool?" And the employee, hopefully, they'll say yes. Most likely, they'll be like, "What?" But hopefully they'll say yes, and when they say yes, that's all that's needed. If they say no, well, then that's a whole different problem. But if they say yes, then OSHA has their footing for being able to say, okay, does that tool in the user manual tell you don't have to wear hearing protection? And you've got the manual right there. OSHA can pull it up. They can make you pull it up and submit it to them, proving that you don't need to wear hearing protection. And when you drop this user manual on them, and it very clearly says wear hearing protection when impact drilling, and you're not making your employees do it, you are violating manufacturer recommendations for operating that tool, which is going to get you an OSHA citation. That's going to be that 51A. You are exposing your employees to a hazard that DeWalt or Milwaukee or Ryobi or whatever tool company that you're using, you're violating their recommendations. You're saying that just because this company who's invested a lot of money into the safety of their tools, just because they've identified a hazard, doesn't mean you care. That's exactly what you're saying. And that's where OSHA can walk around and go, that one, that one, that one, that one, and just point to all these tools and say, how long do you operate this tool for? What is the exposure? And now you're going to have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops when you shouldn't have had to in the first place. So be careful. Think about what you're doing. Employees, don't expose yourself. If you're running a tool for a long amount of time, be careful what you're doing. And if it's loud, be extremely careful what you're doing. So we have this hammer drill, and we also have this tool, and 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 they're all going to say, wear hearing protection. In fact, even this tool. Now, if I walk up to any person in construction that's using power tools, and I say, how long have you been using that tool? And they say, I've only been using this for about 20 minutes. I was, okay. How long over the course of, I don't know, your entire shift, an 8-hour day, how many times do you have to use this tool on average? Oh, well, I probably pull this drill out maybe 20 times a day and use it for like 5-10 minutes. Okay, good to go. So then we start racking that up. And then, let's take a look. 1926 Delta 2I. When the daily noise exposure is compounded of 2 or more periods of noise exposure of different levels, their combined effect should be considered rather than the individual effect of each. Exposure to different levels for various periods of time shall be computed according to the formula set forth in paragraph D2II of this section. Now, that is a very fancy way of saying it's not just the one tool that you're using, not even just the one tool you're using in the one area. It is every bit of sound exposure that this employee is getting. Period. And so I'll point to their drill and I'll say, okay, how long do you operate that per day average? Okay, what about that drill? Okay, what about that reciprocating saw? Okay, what about that? And I'll just point to all the tools that are in their local area. How long do you operate that for on an average every day? And that's where we start getting, okay, well, you were exposed to 110 decibels for roughly an hour each day. You said you use a recip saw about 20 minutes a day. So you're exposed to, and that's where you start climbing up into these higher exposures. Employees, if you wonder why all those construction guys can't hear, those old guys can't hear, it's because they're doing exactly what you're doing. Protect your ears. OSHA's telling you, it's mandating that it's a regulation that you protect your ears. Protect your ears. Employers, make sure your employees always have access to earplugs and have earmuffs available whenever those aren't going to suffice. Again, General Duty Clause 5.1a, each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment in a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. They shall comply with occupational safety and health standards promulgated under this act. Bravo. Each employee shall comply with occupational safety and health standards and all rules, regulations, and orders issued pursuant to this act, which are applicable to his own actions and conduct. So, in a nutshell, yes, hearing loss is what I would consider to be serious bodily harm. You literally can't hear. You've lost one of your senses, and you need to do something about it. You need to, again, walk through that hierarchy of controls. Can you reduce down the noise levels? Finally, we get to can you put on personal protective equipment? But as an employer, you got to make sure it's available. Employees, if your supervisor tells you put on earplugs when you're operating this tool, that doesn't mean just for 1 week. That means for the rest of your life while you are working for that supervisor, put on earplugs while you're operating this tool. And you have to comply or you're violating OSHA. You got me? This is about keeping you and your body safe. So do it. Here's a handout that I typically give to a lot of people whenever I'm doing classes. You can take a screen capture if you want and print it out for yourself. I haven't found any really good literature to hand out whenever I'm teaching classes, and this is the one that I typically give out. The last little snippet is 1926-52 Echo, and that is exposure to impulsive or impact noises should not exceed 140 decibel peak sound pressure level. No matter how long the exposure is, you should not be popping people's eardrums. Well, that's noise injury prevention. A pretty quick video, but overall, pay attention to what you're doing. Think about what you're doing. Look after each other. Older guys and girls, look after the newer guys and girls. Those newbies when they're coming in, especially the 18-year-old kid, the 30-year-old guy who used to be a copying machine guy. They don't know what they're doing when it comes to construction. And we don't want them to be 50 and 60 years old and not hearing and not being able to hear their own grandkids laughing. Look after each other. We are strong because we take care of each other, because we look after each other. We are not strong because everyone looks their own way. I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do. I just work here. That right there, that's one of my pet peeves in construction, is hearing people say, well, I just work here. That's not what's going to get us to the finish line. That's not what's going to get us to this building being completely done, being completely built and turned over to the customer, and nobody's gotten hurt. Take care of yourself. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll see you in the next video.